Hello, Dan,
Hey, Chyanne.
and welcome everyone to the Dan and Cheyenne Show, where we, as always, go deep on the topics that spark that curiosity.
Right into it.
Today we're diving into a really interesting one, the Sasser surname.
The Sasser surname.
Yeah, this was actually a listener suggestion, and putting this together took us through genealogy records and historical analyses and DNA studies and even, the stories of some pretty remarkable folks who've had the Sasser name.
Yeah, and I got to give a shout out to the guy who inspired this whole deep dive author, Daniel T Sasser II.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, this guy's a consultant specializing in AI-assisted workflows and digital strategy.
Show cutting edge.
Yeah, bringing all this technical expertise to his work. He's based in Oklahoma and has a connection to the Cherokee Nation, although he's not a member himself.
Okay.
He's super involved in the ethical AI conversation, too. He even founded the AI Questions and Answers Facebook group.
I've heard of that.
It's a big community for AI enthusiasts, and he shares his thoughts on all these platforms like Hacker Noon and Dev.to and his own blog, dansasser.me, really exploring AI's impact.
Yeah, it's always so cool to see someone so into history also engaged with like the most advanced technology.
Definitely that blend of looking back and looking forward is what makes this so fascinating.
So for our deep dive today, we're going to start way back in Europe.
Okay.
We're going to explore the earliest roots of the Sasser name. We'll follow its journey across the Atlantic to America, see how it spread. We'll also look at what modern DNA analysis tells us about Sasser lineage.
The genetic trail.
And then we'll tackle that intriguing question of a potential connection to the Cherokee Nation, given where some early Sasser families settled.
Yeah, makes sense.
And finally, we'll shine a spotlight on some notable individuals with the Sasser surname, especially in more recent times. So Dan, let's rewind all the way back. What can you tell us about the origins of the name Sasser in Europe?
Well, the most common theory, and the one backed by a lot of genealogical research, takes us to North Germany.
North Germany.
Yeah. The thinking is that Sasser probably comes from the word Sass, which means Saxon.
Oh, interesting.
Now, in German, adding to a word often suggests someone associated with that thing or from a place.
Yeah.
So Sasser would basically be someone connected to the Saxons, either by birth or because they lived in a Saxon area.
Makes sense from a language perspective, but I also saw some info suggesting a link to specific locations.
Right, that's another strong possibility.
Huh.
It could be what we call a habitational name.
Yeah.
You see, there were a few places named Sassen in Germany, spread across regions like Rhineland-Hesse and Pomerania.
Okay.
If folks migrated from those Sassen towns, they might have adopted the surname Sasser to show where they were from.
Yeah.
Kind of like being called John from Sassen, which eventually morphs into just Sasser.
So their last name became like a geographical marker.
Exactly. And get this, there's a village in Hesse called Sassen that goes back to at least 1111 AD.
Sass.
Yep. And even the name Sassen is thought to have Saxon roots. So whether someone was directly linked to the Saxon people or came from a place with a Saxon connection, that Germanic tie seems pretty solid.
Yeah, it does. Now, I also came across a less popular theory about the name maybe originating from an old German personal name.
Right, there's that less supported idea that Sasser could come from the old German name Sasso, meaning stone. However, the evidence really leans towards those Saxon and habitational origins.
Okay.
And funnily enough, one family history website even suggests Sasser might mean he who sits in German. But again, those Saxon and place name explanations are much more widely accepted among researchers.
Right. It's a good reminder that names can have many potential stories,
Absolutely.
even if some are more likely than others. Now, our sources also mention some English-sounding variations of the name.
Right.
What's up with those?
Yeah, we see variations like Sasser, Saucy, Sasser, 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 Sassy de la Sassy, 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 Sasser, and Saucer.
Whoa, that's a mouthful.
It is. And notably, Saucer is considered an English version of Saucer. Now, Saucer itself could have Norman roots, maybe coming from a place called Sassy in Normandy after the Norman conquest in 1066.
Oh, wow.
And Saucer has a double meaning possibility. It could be from a German word meaning noisy mover or from Middle English meaning someone who makes or sells sauces.
Interesting.
This suggests a possible mixing of Sasser lineage with English families over time,
Oh.
maybe through migration or even just similar sounding names developing independently.
So it's not just a straight-up German name. There could be branches with English origins, too?
Exactly. It could be movement across the English Channel or shared linguistic roots from way back.
Okay.
Or even cases where people adopted similar sounding names just because they sounded alike. The fact that Saucer also meant someone who made sauces in English points to a potential separate development of a name that later got linked to the Sasser family.
So back in Europe, where were these early Sassers or Saucers, or however they spelled it, mainly located?
It seems the highest concentration was in North Germany, particularly in places like Saxony and Westphalia.
Right, those areas we talked about with the Saxon connection.
Exactly. And there's even historical evidence of migrations happening between Saxony and Westphalia over time.
So it's just a movement within that region.
Yeah. But here's the fascinating twist. There's a separate Swiss lineage with the surname Sasser.
Sasser spelled just like one of the English variations.
Almost the same. And genetic studies have shown that this Swiss Sasser line is totally unrelated to the North German and English Sasser lines.
Wow, so same name, different origins.
Yeah, it really shows how you can't just rely on a name's surface level.
Right.
So we've got these likely German roots, possible English connections, and this separate Swiss line. How did the Sasser name, especially that German thread, make its way across the Atlantic to America?
Well, the Sasser name pops up surprisingly early in American colonial records.
Oh, yeah.
We have a William Sasser in Norfolk County, Virginia, as far back as 1643.
Sasser with a slightly different spelling again.
Right. And then in 1666, there's a Benjamin Sasser in Somerset County, Maryland.
So both in that mid-Atlantic region quite early on, and the spelling variations continue.
Exactly. Spelling wasn't standardized back then, so we see Sasser, Saucer, and other similar forms, often referring to the same families.
Yeah, looks like there were probably multiple early, maybe independent introductions of the name or similar sounding names into the American colonies.
It sounds like this Benjamin in Maryland really made a name for himself there.
He did.
Yeah.
His family got established in Somerset County, and his son, William Sasser Sr., who died around 1730, became a major landowner.
Okay.
That early land acquisition suggests a degree of financial independence and social mobility,
Okay.
in that early colonial environment.
Makes sense. So from those beginnings in the Chesapeake, how did the Sasser family spread out?
By the 1720s and 1730s, we start seeing the Sasser name popping up in records down in North Carolina.
Okay. A southward migration.
Exactly. There's a John Sasser mentioned as a witness in a legal document from 1732 in North Carolina.
So he was already an adult living there at that point.
Yep. And then in 1737, another John Sasser got a land grant in Craven County, North Carolina. This southward movement from Maryland seems to be a big part of early Sasser history in America.
So is there a direct link we can trace between the Maryland and North Carolina Sassers?
There is a Maryland court record from 1760 specifically mentions a Benjamin Sasser who had lately removed to North Carolina.
Wow. So there's that clear connection.
Yeah, and when we look at the names within the families, you see names like William John Thomas and Benjamin appearing in both the Maryland and North Carolina Sasser families.
Huh.
That pattern strongly suggests they were related as people moved south.
Like they took those names with them as they migrated.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So North Carolina really becomes like Sasser Central in the 1700s, especially in what's now Wayne County.
Okay.
John Sasser Sr., who died in 1782, and his sons owned a good chunk of land there. And there's also Colonel Josiah Sasser, born in the mid-1700s, who fought in the North Carolina militia during the American Revolution.
So they were part of building the new nation.
They were. And then, like many families in America, during the 1800s, some Sassers started heading west. Around 1826, a Henry Sasser moved to Laurel County, Kentucky. And of course, the southward movement continued too.
Like to Georgia.
Yep, some families went down to Georgia. There's even a town in southwest Georgia called Sasser, named after a pioneer settler named Abraham Sasser.
Wow.
And by the early 1900s, we see that westward expansion continuing with records of Dixon Sasser's son in Marion County, Arkansas in 1905, and then in Oklahoma by 1907.
It's so interesting to see that westward movement reflected in the Sasser family history. You mentioned DNA analysis can help fill in some of the blanks here. What have we learned from genetic studies of the Sasser name?
Well, this is where science really helps us dig deeper. You see, the Sasser DNA Project has been using Y chromosome testing, which traces the paternal line.
Right, the male line.
Exactly. And what they found is that 6 seemingly unrelated North Carolina Sasser lines, meaning their paper trails didn't connect, actually share a very similar Y DNA signature.
Wow, so they all likely descended from a single common male ancestor at some point after surnames became a thing. DNA really reveals those hidden connections.
It does, and there was this interesting case with a Tipo H. Sasser born in North Carolina in 1829. His Y DNA didn't match the main Sasser group, but it was a close match to a Howell family from Georgia.
Huh. Howell was a given name in some Sasser lines, too.
It was. This suggests maybe an adoption or a name change somewhere in Tipo's ancestry. Maybe his biological father was a Howell.
It's like a genealogical mystery.
It is. So what about that main North Carolina Sasser line? What does their DNA say about their deeper European roots?
Yeah.
Well, that main line belongs to a Y haplogroup called R1b, specifically the RL21 subgroup. Think of haplogroups like branches on a huge family tree for all of humanity, going way back.
Okay, I'm following.
R1b is a major branch common in Western Europe, and RL21 is a more specific branch within R1b that's especially concentrated in the British Isles,
Mm.
Ireland and Great Britain.
So that points to the paternal ancestors of that main Sasser line, probably coming from that region before coming to America. That's fascinating, especially with the early German associations of the name.
Right, and it's not just the Y-DNA, autosomal DNA testing, which looks at DNA from both parents, also shows connections between different Sasser lines in America.
So everything seems to be adding up.
Yeah, and when we look at the overall ancestry of people with the Sasser surname today, based on 23andMe data, around 60% have British and Irish ancestry, and about 21% have French and German ancestry.
That fits with the Anglo-Germanic roots we've been talking about.
Exactly. The records, the movements, and now the genetics all point the same way. It's a pretty clear picture. Now, given Daniel T Sasser II's connection to Cherokee heritage, we have to ask, did we find any documented link between the Sasser name and the Cherokee tribe in our research?
That's a great question, especially because those early Sasser settlements in North Carolina and Georgia were geographically close to Cherokee territories.
Yeah.
And we know there was intermarriage between European settlers and Cherokee individuals. But based on the specific sources we looked at focusing on the Sasser surname itself, we haven't found a direct, widespread, documented connection to the tribe for those main Sasser lines we trace back to Europe.
Right. So while those families lived nearby, we haven't found a clear genealogical link to the Cherokee Nation in those earlier generations for the main Sasser families.
Right. And it's important to remember the Cherokee have a matrilineal kinship system, meaning lineage and clan membership, traditionally passed down through the mother side.
Mm.
And European-style surnames weren't really used by the Cherokee before contact with Europeans.
Yeah.
So if the Sasser name does show up in Cherokee records, it's most likely because a European Sasser man married a Cherokee woman.
Right.
Their kids would be Cherokee through their mom, and they might have adopted their dad's surname as surnames became more common among the Cherokee.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
What about adoption into the Cherokee Nation? Could that have played a role?
Yeah, adoption was definitely a practice in the Cherokee Nation. The Dawes Rolls, which were compiled in the late 1800s and early 1900s to figure out citizenship in the Cherokee and other tribes, did have categories for citizen by marriage and sometimes adopted individuals. But adoption records might not be as organized or easy to find as other vital records.
Okay.
So while intermarriage seems like the more likely way for the Sasser surname to appear in Cherokee records, adoption is a possibility we can't completely rule out.
So for listeners with the Sasser surname who want to explore a potential Cherokee connection in their own family, what steps should they take?
Well, a good place to start is searching the Dawes rolls specifically for the Sasser surname under those citizen by marriage or adopted categories. Those records are kept by the Oklahoma Historical Society and the National Archives.
Are there any other specific Cherokee Nation records that could help?
Yeah, there are other enrollment records like the Baker Roll, which is for the Eastern Band of Cherokee in North Carolina. The Miller Roll, dealing with Eastern Cherokee, claims the Miller Roll listing Cherokees who stayed in the East after the removal, and the annual Cherokee Census Rolls from 1885 to 1935. These might have info about people with the Sasser surname who were connected to the Cherokee Nation. And
Right.
looking at online databases like Ancestry.com and Family Search could potentially turn up family trees that link Sasser families to documented Cherokee individuals.
Those are good options.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that some data shows a drop in self-identified American Indian ancestry among some folks with the Sasser surname in those databases between 2000 and 2010.
That is curious. It's hard to say for sure why that is without more specific data, but it could be because of evolving ideas about ancestry or changes in how people report it over time.
Now, we also came across some stuff about the Sizemore family in our research on a potential Cherokee connection. Oh, right. The Sizemore family in Kentucky. They have oral traditions of Cherokee ancestry, and there's even a local story about Sasser being used as a nickname, maybe short for assessor, in Clay County, Kentucky, where the Sizemores were prominent.
But we should clarify that this local anecdote doesn't necessarily mean a broader ancestral link to the Cherokee Nation for the entire Sasser family.
Right. It's a cool bit of local history, but it doesn't prove a widespread Cherokee origin for the Sasser surname in general.
Yeah.
And many Cherokee ancestry claims by people with a Sizemore surname have been challenged historically because of a lack of solid documentation.
And then there's the Sasser v. Beck legal case, which involved the Eastern Band of Cherokee. This case confirms there have been people with the Sasser surname living near the Eastern Band more recently, but it doesn't really tell us about older tribal connections.
So while there are ways for folks with the Sasser surname to look into a potential Cherokee connection if they're interested, the main sources we've looked at for the broader Sasser lineage don't show a widespread, documented tribal link for those main European branches.
Mhm.
But now let's switch gears to something else really interesting, the remarkable people who've had the Sasser name, especially in the past century.
Yeah, it's a pretty impressive and diverse group. Let's start with politics. We've got James Ralph Sasser, who was a U.S. Senator from Tennessee for quite a while, from 1977 to 1995.
That's a long time.
Yeah, and he was the chairman of the Senate Budget Committee, so he had a lot of influence. He was a key player in the 1990 budget summit and really important in getting President Clinton's 1993 budget passed. Later on, he also served as the U.S. ambassador to China.
Wow, a national and international figure.
Absolutely. And then more recently in state politics, we have Clayton Wayne Sasser, who served in the North Carolina House of Representatives for the 67th District from 2019 to 2025. He was on the Appropriations and Health Committees, so involved in some big stuff. And he actually beat the incumbent in his Republican primary.
Showing he had strong support.
Yeah. Now, moving on to sports, there have been some amazing athletes with the Sasser name.
Oh yeah, we found quite a few.
Clarence Eugene Sasser, who unfortunately passed away recently, was a true American hero. He received the Medal of Honor for his incredible bravery as a combat medic in the Vietnam War.
An incredible honor.
In 1968, even after being seriously wounded himself, he kept risking his life to save other soldiers.
Wow.
His actions are just remarkable examples of courage and selflessness.
Definitely inspiring.
Yeah.
And then there's some big names in football. George F. Buddy Sasser was a legendary coach at Conway High School. He was also an athletic director and even commissioner of the Big South Conference for a number of years.
Impressive.
Yeah, his impact on college athletics was so huge that the Big South Conference's all-sports trophy is named after him, the Buddy Sasser Cup. He's also in the South Carolina Athletic Hall of Fame.
A true pillar of the sports community there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, in pro sports, we found notable Sassers in both the NHL and the NBA.
Oh, yeah, a talented bunch. In hockey, there's Grant Sasser, who played for the Pittsburgh Penguins in the 1987-88 season. He also had a successful career in the Western Hockey League before that.
Okay.
And in basketball, there's a whole family of talented players. Jason Germain Sasser played in the NBA for several teams between 1996 and 2009.
Good run.
He was the Southwest Conference Player of the Year in college, and he even won a bronze medal with Team USA at the 1998 FIBA World Championship.
That's awesome. And his younger brother, Gerald Henry Braxton Sasser, was drafted into the NBA too and played for the Orlando Magic.
And there's a current NBA player with the name, right?
Yep. Marcus Jerome Sasser Jr. is currently playing for the Detroit Pistons.
Cool.
He had a great college career at the University of Houston, got consensus first-team All-American honors, and was named AAC Player of the Year in 2023. He was a first-round draft pick.
Sounds like basketball runs in the family.
Definitely. His dad, Marcus Sasser Sr., and his uncles Gerald and Jason all play basketball. And even his great-grandfather, John Barber, was a basketball player. Quite a legacy. And then there's baseball. We've got Daniel Mackey Sasser, who played catcher in the MLB for several teams from 1987 to 1995. He was a solid hitter. And Robert Doffel. Rob Sasser made it to the MLB too, playing for the Texas Rangers in one game.
Okay.
He's now a minor league hitting coach, so still involved in the game.
So hockey, basketball, baseball, any other sports we should mention?
Yeah, we have Mathlin, Maddie, Langtor Sasser Robert. She's a really accomplished Olympic weightlifter representing the Marshall Islands. She competed in both the 2016 and 2024 Olympics and was even her country's flag bearer in 2016.
That's amazing.
And she's won multiple gold medals at the Oceania Championships. And then there's Jonathan D. Sasser, who's a top endurance athlete in triathlon and aquathlon. He's been on Team USA for aquathlon 11 times and got 7th place at the World Aquathlon Championships in 2021.
It's incredible how much athletic talent is connected to the Sasser name.
It really is.
Yeah.
But their achievements go beyond sports, too. There have been notable Sassers in all sorts of fields.
Tell me about some of them.
Well, Sean Franklin Sasser became well known from MTV's The Real World. San Francisco back in 1994. His relationship with Pedro Zamora was groundbreaking and had a big cultural impact.
Yeah, I remember that.
Later on, he became a pastry chef and was a dedicated AIDS activist and educator.
He made a real difference. In the business world, we have Fred H. Sasser, who started Central West Refrigerator Dispatch in 1928.
Okay.
That company grew into the Sasser Family Companies, which is a big name in transportation asset leasing. They've been operating for over 90 years and are now in their 4th generation of family leadership.
Wow, that's impressive.
And then there are notable Sassers in religion, the arts academia.
Yeah, we've got Howell Crawford Sasser, who's an Episcopalian clergyman. He serves as the Archdeacon of Gibraltar and has held various positions both internationally and in the U.S. In the arts, there's Angela R. Sasser, a talented fantasy artist and writer known for her Birthstone Goddesses series. Tari Sasser, a contemporary mixed media artist showing her work in Ohio. And Ray Sasser, a well-respected outdoor writer and editor for the Dallas Morning News for over 40 years. He was known for speaking up for the average outdoor enthusiast.
So many different areas of expertise.
And in academia, we have W. Earl Sasser, a professor emeritus at Harvard Business School who was a pioneer in service management. He developed the first course on service operations.
Wow.
Charles E. Sasser is a research professor at LSU specializing in wetland ecology. Scott Sasser is a prominent healthcare executive. Jade S. Sasser is an associate professor at UC Riverside, focusing on gender, climate justice, and reproductive politics. And Kimberly Sasser is an associate professor of English at Wheaton College, specializing in contemporary fiction and post-colonial literature.
It's really inspiring to see all the achievements of people with the Sasser surname in so many fields.
It really is. It shows the wide range of talents and contributions people with this name have made to society.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the Sasser surname, what are some of the key takeaways for you?
Well, we started with the likely Germanic roots of the name, maybe tied to the Saxons.
Right.
We crossed the Atlantic with those early settlers, maybe some English branches mixed in. We followed their spread across America, particularly in the Southeast and then westward. And the DNA evidence has been so helpful in understanding those early connections and origins, even solving a few genealogical mysteries along the way.
And we also looked into that possible connection to the Cherokee Nation.
We did.
Okay.
While we didn't find widespread documented tribal links for those main European Sasser lines, we talked about the geographic closeness and the likelihood of individual connections through marriage and adoption, which are definitely areas for further personal research if anyone's interested.
Right. And then, of course, we highlighted the amazing accomplishments of so many people with the Sasser name in recent history and politics, sports, the arts sciences, and more.
Yeah.
It just goes to show how much history and human experience can be packed into a single family name.
Absolutely. It makes you think about all the untold stories within every surname and how valuable it is to explore our own family histories.
Definitely.
And it shows how traditional genealogy, combined with modern tools like DNA analysis, can give us a much richer understanding of our past.
So as a final thought, the journey of the Sasser name from those European roots to its many branches and the incredible individuals who've carried it reminds us that identity is complex and always changing.
Yeah.
It's a little peek into the huge and interconnected tapestry of human history. What stories might your own family name hold? Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Dan, thank you for sharing your expertise.
It was fascinating.
And just a quick reminder for everyone listening, if you'd like to learn more about Daniel T Sasser II, who inspired this whole deep dive, be sure to visit his website at dansasser.me.
Thanks, Chyanne. And special thanks to Dan Sasser for sparking our curiosity.
And until next time, keep seeking out those sparks of curiosity.
We never know where they might lead.
Absolutely. All right.
See ya.